Okay, we are going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, we are going to have our exclusive interview with Mr. Xu Haoliang. He is the Assistant Secretary General at the United Nations. Stay tuned. Well, this year marks the 40th anniversary of the partnership between China and the United Nations. The first of the organization's agencies to come to China was the United Nations Development Program back in 1979. Now, in the General Assembly Hall of the United Nations in New York, my colleague Liu Xin sat down with the Assistant Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Xu Haoliang. He also holds the post of Director of the Bureau of Policy and Program Support at UNDP. They sat down to discuss the history between the UN and China and also how they can move forward together for the future. Take a look.
Mr. Xu, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So 40 years ago, where were you?
40 years ago, I was just entering the university.
Yes.
So I was a young, energetic student.
Did you ever imagine that you would work for the United Nations?
No, at that time, actually, in newspapers, I did read about UNDP, United Nations Development Program, many interesting projects. In my university times, I was wondering what organization this was. So, but of course, I didn't plan to join UNDP at that time. I'm very happy that I've been working for it for more than 25 years now.
So pretty much you saw the evolvement of this relationship, right? Not from the very beginning, but 25 years, which is very significant already. How would you describe this relationship? How has it been?
Yeah, I think the 40 years of collaboration has been very constructive and productive. Because 40 years is the years of Chinese opening up and reform, right? And we had the honor and the opportunity to accompany China to go through this tremendous period of change.
But before you continue, let me be absolutely clear. You have always observed this relationship from the UN's perspective, or were you working from the Chinese side in the first, and then you jumped to the other side of the table?
No, I would say I was observing this relationship as an average citizen of China, as a young person. And after my studies in China and then in the United States, I had the opportunity to join the UNDP itself. And although I didn't work directly with what we did in China, but I always observed it at close range from inside. And in the last 5-6 years, I also had a direct responsibility for our work in China. So you can say that I have observed the relationship in many different ways.
All right. So in these many different ways, if I ask you to pick one moment that you want to mention here concerning UNDP, we're talking about development program, what would be? When? Where? Who?
It's really difficult to say one moment, but if you allow me, I could say that in different stages of China's development, we played a different role critically, but in different ways. In the 1980s, when we just opened up, and at that time, it was about technology transfer. We helped China to transfer international experiences and technology to help China to develop its socio-economic development. One thing that you may not know is that many vegetables that you eat in China today was introduced to China with the projects that we funded. One thing is broccoli, for example.
Oh, really?
Right? So that was a project in early 1980s to increase the variety of the vegetables in China. We also helped to introduce watermelons, the variety of watermelon from Japan, for example, right? And so many such examples. Early days it was about technology. 1990s, it was about, I would say, sustainability. In 1992, the UN organized the 1992 Rio Sustainability Conference. Right? And from there, we worked with China in a big way to promote sustainability, biodiversity, climate change, pollution reduction, and so forth. Now, in the 2000s, year 2000s, again, we pushed for many other really innovative and interesting projects. Just the two of them. One is, for example, we worked with China from 2006, I believe, to phase out the incandescent light bulbs, right? To reduce energy consumption, but also to help reduce greenhouse gas emission, right? So that project alone was the biggest contributor to China's reduction of greenhouse gases, right? There's one more project I wanted to mention. We started in 2009 after Olympics, right, 2008. At that time, we used the Global Environmental Facility Funds to introduce fuel cell-based technology to power buses for the Olympics as the pilots.
Yeah.
But then we worked with Rugao City in Jiangsu province, and based on this technology to build the hydrogen-based economy. So now the city is a hub of production of various types of vehicles powered by fuel cell.
What about now, in 2019? What kind of technology?
Very good,
are there still
question.
technology transfer being carried out with the help of the UNDP?
I think today China is the second biggest economy in the world, right? And it has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, right? And the GDP per capita, if you look at the constant prices, has increased 24 times, right? And so it's a different country with different capacity. Its R&D expenditure is more than 2% of its GDP, right? Compared to about 3% in Japan, right? So China's capacity has increased significantly. So our role is also changing. So what we work now is with the government to really look at some of the more difficult challenges, such as remaining poverty, right? How to deal with that, the disparities, regional differences, for example, right? But also really how we can work together to use innovative approach to look at the policies. And another major task that we have taken upon, is to work with China to make China's South-South cooperation more effective.
Let me ask you this question. Some people are saying, look, China is the second largest economy, and some countries already say China is not a developing country anymore, and yet we still have over 10 million people who live under $2 a day, right? That's
There's about 2% of the population.
Still about 2% of the population. How come China is not able to solve that problem with its prosperity, and why does it still need the UNDP's expertise?
I think China, I would say that they would like to have international collaboration with the UN because they value what we can bring to China. What we bring to China is not funding, for example, right? What we bring is the international comparative experiences. During different stages of development, the Chinese leadership once said that we helped China in 3 critical ways.
The UN?
Yeah, UN, right. First, we helped China to introduce the sustainability principle in its development approach. So that's very important, right? The second thing is to help China to have developed a talent pool of people who are familiar with the international practice, technology, and helped China to develop in different stages of development. The third thing is that, especially in early days of China's development, we helped China to mobilize international funding and implemented more than 1,000 different types of projects to help China to develop to the stage today. Now today, of course, we have to have different challenges and tasks. So that's where we have to deepen, our discussion in terms of policy options and a collaborative approach to finding solutions.
Okay. Looking forward, I guess this partnership will continue for the foreseeable future to come. What is the biggest challenge in your eyes?
I think the challenge to me, as a UN official working on development with China and with several other, major developing countries, is to think about the question: what kind of value we can add to China's development, right, or to other countries such as India, Indonesia. These are G20 countries from Asia. So what value can we add, so that we don't waste our time and we focus on getting results, right? So I think that, to me, is the biggest challenge. Right.
Do you have any idea how to overcome that challenge, or you're still looking?
I think the best way is to work together. I think, China, as well as other developing countries, know that our mission, right, is to help the development of our developing countries. And we don't have our own agenda. The agenda of the UN, the member states, the 2030 Development Agenda is our agenda. So there's a foundation for a trustful relationship. So based on this relationship, I think we can work together with innovative and open-minded approach to co-create solutions that will address the most stubborn development challenges, I think we can do it.
Yeah. Well, throughout my discussions with UN officials, both here and in China and in other parts of the world, they increasingly talking about leadership role of China in many different endeavors, for instance, climate change or free trade or multilateralism. How do you look at the potential or the expectation on China to assume more of a leadership role on, you know, multilateral stages such as the United Nations? Do you think China is ready? What about, for instance, the United States and other more developed countries? What kind of relationship is China, will be an ideal relationship between China and the other
I think, you know, this is a very complex question, obviously. If you look at China's role in the UN, China now is, you know, paying 12% of of UN's regular budget, right? It's paying 11% of UN's peacekeeping budget, right? Always the second largest after the United States, right? And China is a permanent member of the Security Council, right? So China's role in the UN is very important, right? But I think what China, I understand, right, has tried to pursue is a peaceful rise of China, right, to be a part of the global citizenship. So what I think the leadership of China will be most important to work with the membership of the UN to forge a geopolitical relationship that is not a zero-sum based game, right? That is to can create win-win situation for all, you know, the membership of the UN and for mankind. I think that this is the most important leadership challenge for not only China but for the entire United Nations. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. You know, I think that this can be done. I think with political will and a wise leadership.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and see.
A conversation there between our Liu Xin and Xu Haoliang, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, speaking at the UN in New York recently. And on that note of cooperation, we are going to wrap up this edition of The Point. As always, you can follow us on Facebook as well as on Twitter using the handle ThePointWithLX. You can also download the CGTN app to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.